welcome to the Mississippi Board of Pharmacy Compliance Division's Bullpen Report. As you know, we have launched the Bullpen Reports as a way to discuss important compliance topics, share helpful tips and reminders, and foster a better understanding of compliance. But today we are taking a slightly different approach, and we have brought in some guests to discuss the different divisions of the Board of Pharmacy. I am Katina White, and I'll be serving as the facilitator for the discussion, and I'm also representing the Compliance Division. With me are Ms. Penny Woodbury, Director of Licensing, Ms. Stephanie Mueller, Director of the Prescription Monitoring Program, and Mr. Todd Deere, Associate Director, and has oversight of PBM licensees. Welcome, everyone. So let's start out with a short description of the responsibilities of each division of the Board of Pharmacy. We can start with PMP. Stephanie?
So with the PMP, we collect Schedules 2 through 5, as well as gabapentin and medical cannabis. This would be from all pharmacies that are permitted in the state of Mississippi or outside of the state of Mississippi that dispense and ship those controlled substances into our state. The medical cannabis would come from all the dispensaries that are in our state.
Thank you. Ms. Woodbury?
Thank you, Katina. Licensing is responsible for the issuing, renewing, and amending permits, registrations, and licensing for facilities in and outside of Mississippi, as well as pharmacy technicians, pharmacy school students, and pharmacists.
Thank you, Ms. Woodbury. And I'll chime in for compliance. Compliance is responsible for basically regulation of the Pharmacy Practice Act. This would include inspections and investigations and complaints. It also includes accountability audits, and I will note here that the compliance agents that do the inspections, investigations, and accountability audits are required by statute to be pharmacists. Next, we will hear from the Pharmacy Benefit Manager Division. Mr. Deere?
My name is Todd Deere. I'm the Associate Director here at the Board of Pharmacy. One of my responsibilities includes chairing the PBM division for the Board of Pharmacy. The PBM division is charged with licensing PBMs and regulating their activity with the state pursuant to the statutes that are in the Mississippi statutes. This includes the Mississippi Prompt Pay Act, the Audit Integrity Act, the Affordable Choices Act, and any regulations at the federal level that would apply to PBMs in addition to anything else at the Mississippi level. We would operate primarily on complaint, but also we do have auditability to audit our PBMs as well. Our purview is to ensure that the statutory protections and provisions for PBM activity are followed and that all PBM services that are happening in the state are appropriately licensed.
Next, we'll discuss hot topics for each division, and some might be for the entire agency overall. We will start with PMP.
Thank you, Katina. So I think the first thing we could talk about would be mandatory reporting for all the pharmacies, dispensaries, or dispensing physicians. That is every 24 hours, and that does include 0 reports. So on the days that you do not dispense a controlled substance, you still have to send in a 0 report. Your vendor may have this set up to do automatically for you, or you may do this manually each night. Also, with reporting, you may have to correct some prescriptions. You may have errors. You may have rejections. That is also mandatory and needs to be done within 7 days of the notice of the error. So those have to be taken care of as well. If your pharmacy does not dispense controlled substances, you are permitted to have a waiver of reporting. That is done with your facility's permit upon renewal each time. So you would have that in your gateway in your licensing. If your pharmacy closes, if your pharmacy is set to inactive status, if your pharmacy changes DEA numbers, while you may notify the board of that change, you need to notify the PMP as well so that we can make that change in our system to reflect correct reporting. If you do have to make those error corrections on any rejections or just invalid information, please know that that is the responsibility of the pharmacy and not your vendor. While your vendor may assist you in getting those reports sent back in for you, it is your responsibility to pull that and do it yourself. My next topic would probably be on medical cannabis. I'm sure that's a question that everybody has. And medical cannabis is displayed in the P&P. It is sent in just like a pharmacy does every 24 hours. They zero report as well. However, they only send in 3 different types of NDC numbers. They send in whether your patient smokes, vapes, or has edible cannabis. For your smoked cannabis, it is reported in Mississippi Medical Cannabis Equivalency Units. So 1 would equal 1. So 1 would equal 3.5 grams of the smoked flower. 1 would equal 1 gram of concentrate for a vape, and 1 would equal 100 milligrams of an infused product as an edible. So you'd be able to see how many were dispensed there for your patient. This works similar to the Implex system where you sell your pseudoephedrine for over the counter to your patients. There is a hard stop if your patient is purchasing cannabis. So just like with Implex, and you can't over purchase each month, you would have that hard stop when they go to the dispensary. So you don't have to know how the math works for your patient to know if they're getting more than their quantity each month. They are allowed 6 units in a week and 24 units in a 30-day period. Again, it's reported every 24 hours, just like a pharmacy. I think the last thing I would discuss today would be, as a pharmacist, who are you able to pull reports on? And that's easy. That's anybody you're providing pharmaceutical care for. So that's the bottom line. If you're not providing pharmaceutical care, you have no reason to pull a patient up in the P&P. And that is done either manually, where you type in first name, last name, date of birth in the AWARE system, or if your pharmacy has it integrated with your point of sale or your pharmacy dispensing system, you would be able to click your one click button for your gateway or your NARCS care, and it would pop right up for you to display within that system. View the P&P, and then you'd be able to make your informed decision from there. We do allow pharmacists to have delegates if you need those. Those are required to be a registered pharmacy technician or a pharmacy student. They register the same way that you did, and they list you as their supervisor, and then you would approve them or reject them within your P&P account. Now, while they are able to pull reports and assist you in getting these together, it is your responsibility to review that report once that delegate pulls it for you. And running a report on your patients, if your patient requests a copy of their P&P, you are not permitted to give that out to them. Should your patient have a dispute about something that's on their P&P or just need a copy for their benefit for something else, they are required to contact the Board of Pharmacy directly and speak to the P&P, and we have a form that they fill out and send back in the necessary qualifications for that, and then we will send it back to that patient. But just know that a pharmacy is not allowed to give that out.
So Stephanie, I have a question. So what if a pharmacist or a pharmacist delegate pulled a P&P report on someone who is not a patient of theirs? What are the implications there?
So within a pharmacist's P&P account, they have a record of any P&P that they have pulled, as well as a record of any P&P that their delegate has pulled. Should a pharmacist log in to check up on their delegates to make sure who they're pulling and what they're looking at, they find a patient that they know is not a patient of their store, and they have pulled this person, and you need to report that immediately. Action can be taken on the delegate as well as the pharmacist if it's not reported, because if we discover that you did know this was happening and you did not turn this in, that would be the responsibility of the pharmacist as well as the delegate at that point. That needs to be reported immediately.
Thank you. Now we will hear from licensing on some hot topics for their division.
Thank you, Katina. Some of the challenges that we encounter in the licensing division is when individuals register or log into our system, they run into issues that they have questions about But instead of picking up the phone or stopping and emailing us, they go into the system and just submit an application. Sometimes it's the wrong application. Sometimes it is the wrong answer to the wrong questions. And instead of contacting us, they they complete the application and pay. It's easier for us to stop it on the front end if you just pick up the phone and call us, and we don't have a problem with that. That's what we're here for. We invite you to call us or email us. And if we don't answer the phone, please leave us a message and we'll call you back at our earliest convenience. And we'll make sure that we walk you through the process, answer any questions you may have, no matter how simple or how you may think it's a dumb question. No question is a dumb question. We're here to help you, and we chide ourselves on trying to provide or attempting to provide the best customer service we can provide. Also, another issue we have is for facilities or individuals that have to submit a photo. The facilities, on their applications, we ask for a storefront photo that displays the name of the business. Sometimes we get all kinds of photos. Please do your best to, as clear as you possibly, to show the name of the business, the number, the address, if possible. Just do your best. If you can't, please call us, ask us the pertinent questions, and we'll try to help you with that process, or we'll get our agent to help you with that process if we can't answer it. Individuals that submit a passport quality photo. That doesn't mean that you have to take a picture of your driver's license. That does not mean you have to take a picture of your passport. All it is a headshot, shoulder up selfie, no filters, no headgear unless it's religious, for a religious reason, no sunshades, no family photos, no pet photos. We have these popular facial expressions with the hearts. None of that. We just want a simple headshot. Lastly, profiles. Each individual that uses our system has to have his or her own profile. It cannot be shared. I'll use the example of licensing companies that are contracted with drug facilities or chains. They will have one profile for everybody to use with shared passwords. That's not acceptable. And it's not acceptable for me to go in and create a profile for the pharmacist in charge or for the DR without their permission, because they have to have their own specific information, and the profiles must be complete. Date of birth, some of the questions you may feel like it's invasive, but this information is not for public consumption. Only people see that information is us, and we don't use it only for identification purposes.
Okay, so Penny, I do have one question. Who is able to renew currently?
We opened the portal for renewal August 15th of this year. And anyone, individual or facility, that expiration date is 12/31/2024, can log in to the gateway and renew.
And should they have any questions about renewal?
Tell them to call us at 601-899-8880 and ask for the licensing division.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much. We will move on to PBM. Mr. Deere.
PBM division fields a variety of calls, and we're always happy to hear from you. A lot of times those calls start with, is this plan covered in our statute? One of the few things to think about is there are some preemptions out there. Medicare Part D, the federal plans such as TRICARE, those are typically regulated fully at the federal level. State regulations typically are preempted from those, and so you will defer to the federal plan on that unless potentially if a specific state regulation is not addressed at all in the federal statute, then the state regulation may be in play. However, most of TRICARE and Medicare Part D, we're going to have limited oversight of the provisions of those plans. PBMs, regardless of whether we have oversight over a particular statute, their licensing as a whole, they have to be licensed to do business in the state of Mississippi. Whether that's a federal plan, state plan, commercial plan, self-insured plan, the whole gamut, workers' comp. And so licensing is a universal requirement for PBM activity in the state. One of the most common calls that we get is around underwater reimbursements. And so Mississippi does have statutory authority that if the PBM has reimbursed a pharmacy below their acquisition cost, which in our statute is defined as your invoice, that they have to provide a reasonable appeal process for you to file a complaint about that, and to provide the information that they require, including your invoice acquisition costs, to see if the reimbursement should be at least increased to your invoice cost. We get a lot of complaints where the responses on those do not appear to be following the statute, and we've had several administrative actions around this recently, and so this is really a hot topic in this space right now, and one that I want to call your attention to. We talk about this in good detail in the last newsletter on page 8, the July newsletter, but really around statute 7321-156, which is the maximum allowable cost in MAC appeals. A lot of times people think, oh, I can only appeal things that are on the MAC list, but this actually encompasses any claim that would be below water and be applicable to filing an appeal loan for below cost reimbursement. Some of the common things that we hear as far as invalid responses to this were you were reimbursed at your contracted rate and not at MAC. We do not feel like that is an appropriate response. If you get that response, we'd like to hear about it. Sometimes you'll get a response back that says you can get it at a different wholesaler. But if it's not the wholesaler that you use, that's really not a valid response either. Sometimes the response back may be pay per market rate, reimbursement remains. All of those, if you've provided an invoice showing your acquisition costs, we would say are not appropriate responses, and typically at least. So anything like that, we would be very interested in. We're encouraging you to file your MAC appeals. Per the statute, you have only 30 business days typically to file once that claim has been adjudicated. So it is something that you need to have a process and decide, when you're going to file, but to make sure you hit that window. The other timely topic on this, I mentioned that there had been a couple administrative actions on this. You should have gotten communication both from a couple PBMs and from the Board of Pharmacy about an opportunity to go back and file outside that 30 days, business days for a couple plans with specific BIN and PCN information. And so I would encourage you to look at that as an opportunity if perhaps you haven't been filing MAC appeals, or maybe you've outsourced that to your PSAO. I would really encourage you to ensure you have a feedback mechanism that if they get an immediate denial of acquisition costs, or it was submitted on a wrong template, that you have a way to follow up and make sure that the appropriate information was filed. But I would encourage you to go back and take advantage of those windows and those recent administrative orders that were settlements with a couple PBMs to look at, is it worth the time to go back to file some of the MAC appeals from previous days? It may be a good opportunity there for your pharmacy. And obviously, if you're not getting the response back that they're going to pay you per your invoice, we would really like to hear from you on that. We have a complaint form online, or you can email PBM admin at mbp.ms.gov, or call our main number and ask for the PBM division. That's going to be the 601-899-8880 number, and ask for the PBM division. We'd love to hear from you on this. Thank you.
So, Todd, for those who are listening, what would be the best way to communicate issues that a pharmacy is having, a complaint that they would have against a PBM, and what documentation would be helpful on the front end?
Sure. Probably on this, the easiest way is to pick up the phone and have a phone call because there is a little bit of back and forth to make sure that, the exact type of plan that we're talking about and what protections are in play with that plan. And so call in 601-899-8880 and ask them for the PBM division. It's probably preferred. Email at pbmadmin. .mbp.ms.gov is also another way, or you can submit it on the online complaint form, but with the back and forth needed, I would really probably advise a call initially. A lot of the information, and for those of you who have reached out to me, you're going to hear this and know, yes, indeed, he's going to ask for this. But I really want as much information about the plan that you can give me. I'm gonna need details as far as BIN, group, PCN, if you have it, and then based on your relationship with the patient, and kind of know who is the sponsor of that plan, even on the card, if you've seen the patient's card, which I realize those can be a little bit of a unicorn, but you guys are good investigators to get that information out all the time. So really want to understand as much about the patient situation as far as who their insurance is through as possible. And then obviously what date the claim was filed and the RX number, and very likely it will ask for the NPI number of your pharmacy as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful information. So we'll move on to compliance, and I'll take the hot topics for compliance. The first one is continuing education. As you know, a couple of years ago, we changed the way that we do our CE audits, and we get questions all the time and emails all the time about the CE audits. Basically, it boils down to, for this year, when the renewal application open and a pharmacist goes to renew their pharmacist license, if you are selected for the continuing education audit, this will be the time when that happens. You'll get a pop-up screen on the pharmacist application that says you've been selected. Lucky you. And then it will ask for your continuing education documentation from January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2023. So you would then upload that documentation to the gateway for us to review. It will be in a pending status until staff has reviewed it and signed off on it. So it won't automatically complete just because you uploaded it. One thing to note is that you have 5 days per statute to get your continuing education documentation uploaded to us for review. Now, if you were licensed January 1st, 2023 through January 30th of 2023, you will need to have completed the continuing education for 2023, and you may be a part of the continuing education audit. So you would need that documentation if you're chosen for the audit. If you were licensed between July 1st, 2023 and December 31st, 2023, you would not be required to have obtained that CE for 2023, but you will be required then to obtain CE for 2024 and possibly be audited next year around renewal time. So those are the questions we get about continuing education audits and credits. I'll just go over the continuing education requirements per the regulations. Just as a reminder to everybody, you're required to get 15 total hours of CE each year, and of those 15 total hours, 2 hours have to be live. No recordings. It could be a live webinar, live seminar, of course, but not a recorded session. Recorded sessions would not count as live. And then you also have to have 2 hours that are opioid abuse and prevention or other addiction related issues. The CE has to be ACPE approved or Mississippi Board of Pharmacy approved. And remember that if it's Mississippi Board of Pharmacy approved, we do not report that to your CPE monitor that you may have with NABP. Lastly, but extremely important, is that you are required to provide that documentation. It is not for pharmacy board staff to go and find your documentation on the NABP website. You are required to provide the documentation. The next topic that compliance gets a lot of questions about still is telehealth prescribers. So providers that provide telehealth services for patients and the basis of their relationship is solely that telehealth visit, those providers, whether it's a physician or a nurse practitioner, have to be licensed in Mississippi. Basically, the medical board says the care of the patient takes care where the patient is. So patients in Mississippi that are going through a telehealth visit with a provider, that provider must be licensed in the state of Mississippi. You can check the Board of Medical Licensure's website or the Board of Nursing's website to verify if a telehealth provider is licensed. And lastly, for us, I just want to make a note for the pharmacist in charge. We have tried to communicate this out, but I want to put it out there as a reminder, just to help our pharmacists in charge. There's two things. Make sure that only active employees are working in the pharmacy. If you go to our website, the board's website, look under licensing verification. You can look up any person, facility, whatever, and it will show what the current status of their license is. So if you have a pharmacist, you have a pharmacy technician, or you have a student, please make sure that their licenses are active before they even come into the pharmacy to work. Performing or actively observing any technician, pharmacist, or student-related duties without an active registration or license is not allowed. So you would need to make sure that you have checked that licensing verification page on our website to make sure that the people that are working in the pharmacy are licensed and that you are not in violation of the regulations. And lastly, for pharmacists in charge, if you're going to be out on a prolonged absence or leave, although not required for you to relinquish your PIC role, it is highly encouraged that you would do so if you're going to be away from the pharmacy for an extended period of time. Consider this. Do you want to be responsible for the complete oversight of the pharmacy without you being there for a prolonged period of time? If violations happen to occur while you're out, then you are still responsible and you can be held accountable for those violations by the board. And it has happened before. So again, although not required, the best course of action for a pharmacist in charge who has to be out for a prolonged period of time, the best course of action would be for you to remove yourself from that permit if an extended absence is expected, so that you can avoid any disciplinary consequences for things that may happen at that pharmacy while you are not there. And that's all that I have for the compliance hot topics. Now that we've discussed some hot topics for each division, let's move into some questions and answers. And we want to thank those who submitted questions for our Q&A session. I want to go ahead and get that out of the way, and thank you for doing that. And we will try our very best to get to some of those questions as we go through our Q&A. The first question we have is going to be for Stephanie and the PMP. Stephanie, the question is, who is required to register for the PMP?
Any pharmacist that holds an active Mississippi pharmacist license is required to register for the PMP. Whether you're practicing in the state, out of the state, not practicing, you are required to register. If you are a newly licensed pharmacist, that is done automatically for you, and you're sent an email to go in and update the rest of your account. Otherwise, you need to make sure that you have an active registration with the PMP.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is for licensing. So Penny, the question is, if my renewal was submitted before 12/31/24, but has not been approved, can I continue to practice if I'm a pharmacist or operate if I'm a drug facility after 12/31/24?
I'll have to go back to the regs. First of all, even though you submitted your application before the 31st, it does not mean that you can continue to practice after 12/31/2024. All that is the staff reviews each application in order that they are received. In the past, we've had individuals that wait until 12/31 to submit their application, and they have the expectation that the staff is going to approve it. The 31st is considered a holiday, and sometimes it is the weekend. We do our best to get to the applications as quick and as efficient as we can, but sometimes the documents uploaded may not be complete, and we may have to send you an email and ask for more documentation. That does not fall on us, that falls back on the individual or the facility. So, rule of thumb, since we do open the portal August 15th of every year, I would take advantage of that time to submit the application just in case we have follow-up requests for documentation. Because when January 1st roll around, your permit will show expired on the gateway, on the portal, and you will be out of compliance.
Thank you, Penny. That's important to note. The quicker that you get your renewal in, the quicker you can ensure that staff have time to review it and you will have an active license on January 1st.
Most definitely.
So the next question is a general question, and I'll give this one to Todd. Todd, in the July newsletter, we had a article in there about 503B facilities. And so there's a question that has asked us to clarify what the statement that was made about a 503B facility being able to sell patients specifically. The question specifically says, can you provide the reference in the current FDA regulations regarding 503B facilities or the proposed 503B guidance that allows for 503Bs to sell directly under a patient-specific prescription? We have another question for PMP. So Stephanie, this question's for you, and it's from a pharmacist. Are we required to use the PMP?
That's a great question. The intent of the board is that all pharmacists utilize the PMP on a regular basis and based on their professional judgment. But prior to dispensing a prescription for a Schedule II opiate, a pharmacist shall review the PMP if the patient is a new customer to the pharmacy or the patient has not had an opioid prescription filled at that pharmacy within the past 6 months. On top of that, a pharmacist shall review the PMP every 6 months for any patient who is receiving controlled substances.
Okay, that's a good question. So if I am a patient that's receiving a controlled substance and I want my PMP, a good question would be, who can a pharmacist give a PMP report to?
Well, a PMP report cannot be given out to anyone by any user. So specifically for a pharmacist, if a patient wants a copy of their PMP, they contact the Board of Pharmacy, and we have steps that they take to get those. If anyone else were to come into your pharmacy, let's say local law enforcement with the investigation, I'll go as far to say DEA, MBN, anyone of that nature comes into your pharmacy with an investigation requesting you to give them a report on a patient that they know comes to your pharmacy, you are not permitted to give that out. You do need to refer them to the P&P directly, and we have an avenue that they are able to do that. Let's also say maybe another provider or another pharmacy wants a copy of a P&P from your store. You're not permitted to give that out either. So in general, you can't give a P&P out to anyone. It is for your use for pharmaceutical care.
That's good information to have, just so that everyone makes sure they remain in compliance with what you can do with a P&P report. The next question is going to be for you, Penny, for licensing, and it's in reference to either a pharmacist renewal application or a drug facility renewal application. And they want to know, how do they answer the question on the application that says, have you been disciplined? There's a question that also says, has any action been taken against your license since your last renewal?
I would advise anyone that is completing the renewal application, whether you're a pharmacist or a facility, to answer that question honestly. If any action has been taken against your license, or you've been disciplined by any regulatory authority since the last renewal period, answer yes, and the system will open up, the portal will open up and allow you an opportunity to upload supporting documentation, whether that be adjudication papers, whether it be board order or consent agreement, whatever it is, provide that documentation in or out of state.
Thank you. That's helpful information too, and it helps the process to move along quicker when they go ahead and divulge the information and upload that documentation, and then we have it and can review it for possible renewal of their application, of their license. Okay. Our next question is another general question, and it has to do with the DSCSA, which is the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. And Todd will take this question.